Good morning, everybody. This is Alex from the Caddis Fly Shop here. I'm going to be tying a fly today that's pretty much just a crafter baitfish variation that's in mullet color, so just for fun, I'm calling this the Mullet Man. One of my favorite hooks ever to tie baitfish patterns on is a B10S 1/0. It handles stripers and all kinds of kind of big predatory baitfish eating fish, but I wouldn't get too crazy with it, because certain things can straighten this thing out. But anyway, that's not important. So what I'm going to do is wrap this down the shank of the hook. A nice coating. I'll trim that tag in. I will take some Wapsi Medium Select Bucktail. We have this from Spirit River. Always readily available here at the shop. I'm going to take a pretty long piece of this stuff here. You know, a good 2 or 2.5 inches. And sometimes it's hard to control how long your bucktail fibers are, but for something like this, I like to have it real nice and long. Kind of helps, something else I'll add with the bucktail application. So I'm using this for this tail part. I'm using this kind of lower part of the bucktail, not quite where it's so springy and stiff, but you kind of want the more hollower hairs, because what it does is it kind of keeps this whole thing in plane. So I'll lash that onto the hook here. And I find that to be a very important kind of balancing key here. So what I will do is then add a pretty generous amount of white craft fur, just to kind of add a little bit of wiggle in the back, but really it's just kind of to coat around this bucktail here. And I'll be pretty sparse with this, so you don't need much. Just kind of starts helping getting some bulk in the fly, and I'll kind of even use some of this back fluff and fuzz. I won't even take it out of this. I'm just kind of wrap it around the hook with my fingers like that, and it kind of see. It's very subtle. Just doing it to kind of fluffen it up a little bit, because I'm about to take this EP craft fur brush and palmer it a couple times around this to kind of add flash and add a little bit more material. Brand new one too, everybody. It's always a good day. Here we go. So for the back of this, I usually cut these brushes into about sections of 4. Because if you're kind of sit down and tie a bunch of these kind of patterns in one setting, it just makes it so it's, you kind of have a uniform product at the end. I've mentioned this before, but this kind of acts like a feather. And so there is a certain way to tie these in right for it to wrap around. It's like kind of where that wire comes out. That's the direction you want it to go. See how the fur kind of comes that way? So it kind of goes away from itself. It'll just fold around that hook a lot better. I'll bring this down, tie all that wire in. It's all right. So I'll kind of wrap like pretty tight next to each other. Make sure after each wrap, you kind of, maneuver the fibers back a little bit. Kind of even start kind of getting the illusion of this baitfish profile we're kind of going for. And when all this gets wet, it kind of sparsens up. Make sure you get all that wire stuff tied and all the wire tag-ins tied in well too. That's why I use a thick GSP, this 150. It really wraps well around the hook. I can coat things, but then when I want to twist it like that and then crank down, the diameter of it really shrinks up, which is nice. It just makes it very versatile to tie with. This right here is silver polar flash, or polar chenille, excuse me. And I'll use that to kind of create extra bulk and introduce some new colors. Why I use these brushes and then the Palmer chenille is I really like the UV quality. You kind of have this UV blue, which is just something that really just I think fish react to very well. It's kind of mixed up with this silver here. I'll wrap that good ways up the shank and leave about 1/4 of the shank to make the head here. Do that, and like just every time you're wrapping something like this, be patient. Just really make sure you're not over wrapping stuff. You can always come in with like a gun cleaning brush or kind of a fly tying. It kind of looks like a toothbrush kind of thing. I mean, you kind of tease the fibers out, but you don't always have to. And I'll kind of do this when I'm kind of pulling something back. You kind of do this little, I don't even know how to say it. It's like a little triangle finger thing, but it just gets all your material back, and then it'll kind of gives it a good profile there. You can even tie that and throw that as a fly. I know that something like that works really well, but what I will do is use another chunk of this white craft fur, and what I'm going to do is actually cut this from the material itself, kind of cut a chunk out of it. And what I'll do is do 2 of them, because what I'm wanting to do is get a lot of this like under fur into this fly, because now I'm starting to kind of create a bulky head. With that being said, you don't want to take out any of the stuff in the back, so I'm going to give it a cut that kind of, I call it hide. It's just kind of a fake skin off of both of these chunks of this, because I really want to get that back fluff in there. It also kind of adds the weight, because what I'm wanting this thing to do is really deviate, move a lot as I'm fishing it. And so like, see how much, I mean, you can be really generous on this stuff, because that's really what kind of creates the fly. But I kind of use a technique like you would spinning deer hair. So I'm going to do one pretty secure wrap, but not anything too tight, and then do another one tighter, and that third one's very tight. I kind of do 2 and then really crank it down. Then I'll do a couple other wraps. But before I continue, see how I almost have this like little fluffy kind of stuff in the back? What that does is when I reverse all this craft fur back, it gives it kind of a, see how, it just comes out beautifully, I think, with this kind of big fat headed profile. And that's what you get the motion out of your fly. And what's important about using a material like craft fur is it's so light, because you can use something and use these same kind of dimensions when you're making a bait fish pattern, and it won't move as well, but this will. And lastly, I will take another 3-inch craft fur brush. It's olive, which is a very common bait fish color head, and I'll just do that over the front of this craft fur. And I'll be honest, eyes are optional on this fly. There's a couple other flies I have tied where I demonstrate the liquid fusion application and tab eyes, but really with something like this, I like to keep it simple. And so I will do that, really secure it a couple times. And when you're trimming this wire, please use crappy scissors like I'm using here, because it will just tear your stuff up. Since I tie with it so much, it's, I always have a junky pair of scissors next to me. All right, and then kind of wrap that back, give you enough room to wrap this a couple times. If you ever notice and take a look at like a bait fish, a lot of times the head is darker than the rest of the body. Not always, but it just kind of little details like that I think is more important about making a fly than it is the fly itself. And just really kind of get that massaged out there. A regular like hair comb works great too for getting material teased out. Okay, we're about ready to catch that. And yeah, like I was saying earlier, you can be careful with this wire, especially after I trim it. It'll really cut your thread. Kind of do that. And if you kind of get too close to the eye of your hook, you can really pack, kind of like, a lot of techniques, like if you've ever played with deer hair, but like what I'll do is like, I don't have to do it here, but if I have to, I can take all this and push it back. But since I trim that wire tight, and sometimes I'll fold it back. There we go, now it's nice and tied off. I'll do my whip finishes. Now there's a GSP with the whip finishes. Don't pull too hard or it just slides on itself. Be careful with that. So that I always kind of, people haven't messed with this thread before. It definitely is different. It's really slick stuff. Kind of take the end of my whip finish here and go around, get some of this teased out. And voila. There's tons of colors available with those these craft fur brushes. And you can really just have fun with this stuff. It's fun to just fill up a whole box of these kind of flies. You can put feathers in the back and all kinds of stuff. The world's your oyster. So get out there and get some fishing in.